The red ink was still wet on the guest list. Jasper Thorne, the ruthlessly ambitious CEO of Thorne Capital, didn't just cross his wife's name out. He erased her existence from the night entirely. He told his staff she was too simple for the Vanguard Gala, the most exclusive event of the decade. He wanted to walk the red carpet with a woman who looked the part of a billionaire's partner. He thought Elara was just a waitress he'd rescued from a diner 5 years ago. He thought he held all the cards. But Jasper made a fatal miscalculation. He didn't know that the very building he was standing in, the security team guarding the doors, and the billions of dollars represented in that room ultimately answered to one person. And she wasn't coming as his wife, she was coming as his boss. The air in the executive suite of Thorne Capital smelled of espresso, aged leather, and fear. It was a Tuesday afternoon in Manhattan, the kind of gray, drizzly day that made the lights of the skyscrapers look like diamonds trapped in steel. Jasper Thorne stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the ants, the people, scurrying along Fifth Avenue. He adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Brioni suit, the fabric costing more than most people earned in a month. Behind him, his personal assistant, a nervous young man named Magnus, held a clipboard with trembling hands. "The Vanguard Gala guest list, sir," Magnus stammered. "The organizers need final confirmation by 4 p.m. It's regarding the seating at the Alpha table." Jasper turned. He was a handsome man, undeniably. High cheekbones, eyes the color of cold steel, and a jawline that looked carved from granite. But his eyes lacked warmth. They calculated. They assessed value. And lately, he had been assessing the value of his marriage. "Read it to me," Jasper commanded. "Mr. Jasper Thorne," Magnus read, "and Mrs. Elara Thorne." Jasper held up a hand. "Stop." He walked over to the heavy mahogany desk, picked up a red fountain pen, a Mont Blanc limited edition, and held it out. "Give it here." Magnus hesitated, then handed over the list. With a singular, violent stroke, Jasper drew a line through Mrs. Elara Thorne. He didn't just cross it out. He scratched it until the paper tore slightly. "Sir?" Magnus whispered, his eyes wide. That's your wife." "Elara is a distraction," Jasper said, his voice smooth and devoid of guilt. "Tonight isn't a social outing, Magnus. It is a merger. I am meeting with Silas Sterling. The Sterling family essentially owns the logistics industry in Europe. I need to impress him. I need to project power, sophistication, and relentless ambition." Jasper tossed the clipboard back onto the desk. It clattered loudly in the silent office. "Elara," Jasper continued, wiping a speck of dust from his lapel, "is sweet. She makes excellent pot roast. She keeps the penthouse tidy. But let's be honest, Magnus. I found her waiting tables at a diner in soothing silence. She wears department store dresses. She laughs too loud. She doesn't know the difference between a Pinot Noir and a Merlot. If I bring her to the Vanguard Gala, sitting next to the Sterlings and the Vanderbilts, she will be an anchor around my neck. I need a sail." "So she is not attending?" "No. Update the registry. Replace her name with Irene Vane." Magnus flinched. Irene Vane was the lead legal counsel for their competitor, a woman known as the Viper of Wall Street. She was stunning, cruel, and incredibly wealthy. "Irene matches the aesthetic," Jasper said, turning back to the window. "She speaks French and Italian. She knows the market. She adds value. Elara subtracts it." What should I tell Mrs. Thorne?" Magnus asked, clearly dreading the task. Jasper checked his Patek Philippe watch. "Tell her nothing. I'll send her a text saying I'm working late, and the gala was canceled due to security concerns. She's gullible. She'll believe it. She always does." Jasper smiled at his reflection in the glass. He felt powerful. He was shedding the dead weight. He was optimizing his life, just like he optimized his portfolio. He had no idea that the dead weight he was cutting loose was the only thing keeping him afloat. 3 miles away, in the sprawling penthouse of the obsidian-black residential tower known as The Spire, Elara Thorne sat on a velvet ottoman. She wasn't crying. She was holding her phone, the screen still glowing with a notification from a security contact she had embedded in Thorne Capital's IT department. She had seen the digital alteration to the guest list the moment Magnus entered it into the system. Guest removed, Elara Thorne. Guest added, Irene Vane. Elara placed the phone face down on the marble coffee table. She stood up and walked to the mirror. Jasper saw a waitress. That's what he wanted to see. 5 years ago, when they met, she was working at a diner. He had swept in, the charming billionaire prince, and saved her. He loved the narrative of being the savior. He loved having a wife who looked up to him with wide, grateful eyes. He never asked why a waitress spoke fluent Mandarin. He never asked why she knew how to navigate a 7-course formal dinner setting perfectly. He never asked where her inheritance from her deceased grandmother actually came from. He never asked, so she never told him. Elara wasn't just Elara Thorne. She was born Elara Street Jason, the sole heiress to the St. Jason legitimate banking dynasty, a fortune so old and so vast it was rarely discussed in Forbes because the family paid to keep it out of the magazines. She had left that life because she wanted to be loved for herself, not her checkbook. She had hidden her identity, taken a humble job, and fallen in love with Jasper. She thought he was different. She thought he loved her. For 5 years she had played the role of the simple, supportive wife. She had secretly funneled deals Jasper's way through shell companies. The lucky break he got with the Asian market, that was her. The sudden approval for his construction permits in London, her uncle called a favor. She had been the wind beneath his wings, invisible and silent. And today, he had cut her from the list like she was a budget item. He thinks I'm an anchor, Elara whispered to the empty room. Her voice wasn't shaky. It was cold. She picked up her phone and dialed a number that hadn't been saved in her contacts, but one she knew by heart. Mr. Sterling, she said when the line connected. On the other end, Silas Sterling, the man Jasper was desperate to impress, answered immediately. His tone was not one of a business superior, but of a respectful subordinate. Ms. Elara, Sterling said, it has been a long time. To what do I owe the honor? Are we still on for the acquisition? We are, Elara said, walking into her massive walk-in closet. She ran her hand over the row of simple floral dresses Jasper liked her to wear. She ripped one off the hanger and threw it on the floor. But there is a change of plans for tonight. I will be attending the Vanguard Gala. Excellent, Sterling said. Jasper must be thrilled to finally show you off. Jasper doesn't know, Elara said. In fact, Jasper has removed me from the list. He is bringing Irene Vane. There was a heavy silence on the line. The Viper? That is a bold move, and a foolish one. Do you want me to cancel the meeting with him? No, Elara said. Her eyes landed on the back of the closet, on a biometric safe hidden behind a row of winter coats. She placed her thumb on the scanner. Beep! Click! The heavy steel door swung open. Inside, there were no floral prints. There was a gown of midnight blue silk, encrusted with real crushed diamonds along the bodice, a piece commissioned from Elie Saab that cost more than Jasper's favorite sports car. Beside it lay a jewelry set, the Star of the East, sapphire necklace, a family heirloom worth $40 million. Let the meeting proceed, Silas, Elara said, pulling the gown out. The light caught the diamonds, scattering rainbows across the room. But I want you to make a call to the venue manager. The Vanguard Gala is being held at the St. Regis Legacy Hall, correct? Yes, Miss Elara. Good. Remind the management who actually owns the deed to the St. Regis Legacy Hall. You do, ma'am, through the St. Jason Trust. Exactly. Tell them the owner is coming for a site inspection tonight. And tell them to roll out the real red carpet, the one we keep for royalty. And Jasper? Elara smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile that would have terrified her husband. Jasper wants a woman who fits the image of power? He wants someone who isn't a distraction? Fine. Tonight I'm going to show him exactly what power looks like. I'm not coming as his wife, Silas. I'm coming as the woman who can buy and sell his entire company before dessert is served. Understood, Sterling said, a hint of excitement in his voice. This will be a night to remember. Elara hung up. She looked at the simple woman in the mirror and wiped off her light pink lipstick. She reached for the deep, blood-red shade she hadn't worn in 5 years. The waitress was gone. The Queen was back. The St. Regis Legacy Hall was a fortress of gold leaf and velvet, a venue so exclusive that money alone couldn't buy you entry. You needed influence. Tonight, the air outside the massive double doors vibrated with the frenetic energy of the paparazzi. Flashbulbs popped like lightning storms, illuminating the sleek black limousines depositing the city's elite onto the plush crimson carpet. Jasper Thorne stepped out of his Maybach, adjusting his cufflinks. He felt electric. This was where he belonged. Beside him, Irene Vane emerged like a predator slipping into water. She wore a dress of severe, metallic silver that clung to her frame like liquid mercury. It was sharp, modern, and screamed, "Money." "Smile, Jasper," Irene murmured, her lips barely moving as she waved to the press. "The cameras love a merger, and right now, we look like the most expensive merger in New York." Jasper smirked, placing a hand on the small of her back. "You look formidable, Irene." "I know," she replied coolly. "Did you handle the domestic situation?" Jasper tapped his tuxedo pocket where his phone lay silent. "Handled. I texted Elara 10 minutes ago. I told her the event was canceled due to a bomb threat, and that I was staying at the office to secure the servers. She sent back a heart emoji, and told me to be safe. It's almost too easy." "Pathetic," Irene scoffed, though her eyes were scanning the crowd, calculating who was worth talking to. "She sounds like a golden retriever. Loyal, but ultimately just a pet. You need a wolf, Jasper, someone who hunts with you." They walked the carpet, basking in the attention. Jasper felt a surge of validation. This was the image he wanted. With Elara, he always felt like he had to protect her, to guide her through social interactions. With Irene, he was part of a power duo. They reached the entrance, where Henri, the legendary maitre d' of the Legacy Hall, stood with a digital tablet. Henri was a man who had denied entry to princes because they weren't on the list. He was the gatekeeper of high society. "Mr. Thorne," Henri said, his face an unreadable mask of professional polite indifference, and "Ms. Vane." "We are at the Alpha table with Silas Sterling," Jasper said, lifting his chin. "Make sure the champagne is chilled. 1959, Dom Perignon." Henri didn't move. He looked down at his tablet, then back up at Jasper. There was a flicker of something in Henri's eyes. Not respect, but something closer to pity. "Mr. Sterling has arrived, yes," Henri said softly, "but there has been a slight adjustment to the seating protocol tonight. The Alpha table is reserved for the owner and their personal guests." Jasper frowned. "I am a personal guest of Silas Sterling." "Mr. Sterling is a guest of the owner as well," Henri corrected. "You have been seated at table 14, near the kitchen." Jasper's face went cold. "Excuse me? Table 14? I am the CEO of Thorn Capital. This is a mistake. Fix it." "There are no mistakes at the Legacy Hall, Mr. Thorne," Henri said, his voice dropping an octave, turning icy. "However, the owner has not yet arrived. When she does, you are welcome to petition her for a seat upgrade, though I would advise against it." "She?" Irene raised an eyebrow. "Who is this owner?" "I thought the St. Regis Group was owned by a faceless conglomerate." "The deed changed hands privately 5 years ago," Henri said, checking his watch. "And I suggest you move inside. You are blocking the entrance. Protocol Zero is about to be initiated." "Protocol Zero?" Jasper scoffed. "What is that?" "The president arriving." "Higher," Henri said, looking past Jasper's shoulder toward the street. "The landlord is coming." Jasper grabbed Irene's arm, pulling her inside, fuming. "Ridiculous. Probably some ancient widow who bought the place to feel important. Table 14. I'll buy this damn building tomorrow just to fire that Frenchman." They took their seats at a humiliatingly small table near the service doors. The room was buzzing. The billionaire titans of industry, Silas Sterling, the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, were all gathered at the center of the room around a massive, empty circular table adorned with white orchids. They weren't eating. They were waiting. "Look at Sterling," Irene whispered, sipping her water distastefully. "He looks nervous. Silas Sterling never looks nervous." "Who on earth are they waiting for?" Jasper checked his watch. "Whoever it is, they're late. Unprofessional." Suddenly, the lights in the massive hall dimmed. The murmur of the crowd died instantly. The heavy oak doors at the main entrance didn't just open. They were swung wide by 4 security guards, moving in perfect synchronization. A hush fell over the room. Outside, the atmosphere had shifted from chaotic to reverent. The paparazzi, usually a pack of screaming hyenas, had lowered their cameras. A silence had descended on the street. Rolling silently onto the curb was not a limousine. It was a vintage Rolls-Royce Phantom IV, the kind only owned by royalty and heads of state. It was jet black, with the emblem of the St. Jason family crest, a golden phoenix, discreetly painted on the door. The driver, a man with white gloves and military posture, stepped out and opened the rear door. First, a pair of heels touched the pavement. They weren't the sensible pumps Elara Thorne wore to the supermarket. They were custom Christian Louboutins, encrusted with Swarovski crystals, the soles as red as fresh blood. Then she emerged. Elara stood on the sidewalk, the night wind catching the heavy silk of her midnight blue gown. The dress was a masterpiece of architecture and fashion, fitted perfectly to a body that Jasper had ignored for years. It plunged daringly in the back, revealing skin that glowed under the streetlights. But it was the necklace that made the onlookers gasp. The Star of the East sapphire sat at her throat, surrounded by diamonds the size of quail eggs. It was a piece of jewelry that belonged in a museum, radiating a cold blue fire. Elara didn't smile. She didn't wave. She looked up at the massive building she owned, her face a mask of regal indifference. "Welcome home, Madam Street Jason," the driver said. "Thank you, Alfred," she replied. Her voice was different. The soft, apologetic tone she used with Jasper was gone. This voice was rich, commanding, and absolute. She walked toward the entrance. Henri, the maitre d', didn't just nod. He bowed. Deeply. A full 45-degree bow of subservience. "Madam," Henri breathed, "we were not expecting you to grace us tonight. It is an honor." "The guest list required curation, Henri," Elara said, not breaking stride. "I'd decided to do it myself." "Of course. We have prepared the royal carpet." Henri snapped his fingers. 2 staff members immediately unrolled a secondary carpet over the standard red one. This one was purple, the color of kings. Elara stepped onto it. Inside the hall, the massive screens that usually showed charity logos flickered and changed. A live feed from the entrance appeared. Jasper, sitting at his small table near the kitchen, looked up at the screen. He squinted. "Is that?" he started, his voice trailing off. On the screen, the camera focused on the woman walking down the purple carpet. The camera zoomed in on her face. Her makeup was bold, her eyes sharp and fierce. She looked like a goddess of war. "That looks like Elara," Irene said, letting out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "But better, taller, richer." "It can't be," Jasper said, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Elara is at home. She's eating pot roast. She's watching a reality show. That woman is wearing the St. Jason sapphire. That necklace was lost in an auction 20 years ago." "Jasper," Irene said, her voice dropping, losing its arrogance, "look at the way she walks. That isn't a waitress. That's a predator." On the screen, the woman reached the double doors. The feed cut. The real doors of the ballroom swung open. For a second, nobody moved. Then, Silas Sterling, the man Jasper desperately needed to impress, stood up. Then, the CEO of Google stood up. Then the Senator of New York stood up. Like a wave crashing through the room, the entire hall of 300 billionaires rose to their feet. Chairs scraped against the floor. It was a sign of ultimate respect. Jasper remained seated, frozen in confusion. "Stand up, you idiot!" Irene hissed, grabbing his arm and yanking him up. "I don't know who she is, but if Silas Sterling stands, we stand." Jasper stood, his legs feeling like jelly. He watched the doorway. Elara walked in. She didn't look at the floor. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked straight ahead, her gaze sweeping over the room like a searchlight. She owned the air in the room. She owned the ground beneath their feet. She began to walk toward the center of the room, toward the alpha table. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. As she passed table 14, she didn't stop. She didn't even turn her head. But Jasper smelled her perfume. It wasn't the vanilla scent she wore at home. It was a custom blend of jasmine and oud, expensive, rare, and intoxicating. "Elara?" Jasper whispered. The word barely escaped his throat. She didn't react. She kept walking. But Irene saw it. She saw the slight tightening of the woman's jaw. "Oh my God," Irene whispered, her face draining of color. "It is her. Jasper, what have you done?" Elara reached the center of the room. Silas Sterling stepped forward, taking her hand and kissing the air above it. "Elara," Silas said, his voice amplified by the silence of the room, "you have outdone yourself. You look magnificent." "Thank you, Silas," Elara said. Her voice carried clearly, calm and melodious. "I thought it was time the St. Jason family stopped hiding in the shadows. Tonight is about legacy, after all." A murmur rippled through the crowd. St. Jason, the banking dynasty, the silent trillions. Jasper, standing by the kitchen doors, felt like he had been punched in the gut. St. Jason? His wife? The woman who clipped coupons for groceries? The woman who asked him for permission to buy a new winter coat? "No," Jasper muttered. "This is a joke. This is some sick prank." He pushed past Irene. He stumbled toward the center of the room. His brain couldn't process the reality shift. He needed to reassert control. He was the husband. He was the head of the household. "Elara!" Jasper shouted. The sound shattered the polite atmosphere. Several security guards stepped forward, but Elara held up a hand, stopping them. She turned slowly. Her eyes locked onto Jasper's. Across the room, their gazes met. Jasper expected to see love or fear or apology in her eyes. He saw nothing. It was like looking into a frozen lake. Jasper walked up to the edge of the Alpha Circle. He was sweating. "Elara, what is this? What are you doing here? I thought you were at home." "I was," Elara said coolly. "But then I decided to check on my investment." "Investment?" Jasper laughed nervously, looking around at the crowd, trying to bring them in on the joke. "Elara, honey, you're confused. You've had maybe too much wine? Come on, let's go. You're making a scene. And take off that costume jewelry. It's embarrassing." The room went deadly silent. Silas Sterling looked at Jasper with open disgust. "Costume jewelry?" Irene Vane had followed Jasper. She was a lawyer. She knew when a case was lost, but she couldn't stop herself. She stared at the sapphire. "Jasper, shut up! That's the Star of the East. It's worth $40 million. Jasper blinked. "Don't be stupid, Irene. Elara is a waitress. I found her in a diner in New Jersey." Elara took a step forward. The heels clicked ominously on the marble. "You found me where I chose to be found, Jasper," she said. "I wanted to know what it felt like to live a life without the weight of my name. I wanted to see if a man could love me and not the St. Jason fortune." She tilted her head. "For 5 years I played the part. I cleaned your house. I cooked your meals. I supported your dreams. I secretly funded your 3 biggest mergers because you were too incompetent to close them yourself." Jasper's face turned purple. "That's a lie. I built Thorn Capital." "You built a house of cards," Elara said calmly, "and I was the glue holding it together. But today—" She paused, reaching into her small clutch bag. She pulled out a piece of paper. It was a printout of the guest list, with the red ink slash through her name. "Today, you decided I wasn't good enough," Elara continued, her voice hardening. "You erased me, Jasper. You thought I was an anchor. You wanted a sail." She looked at Irene. Irene flinched under the gaze. "Well, now you have your sail," Elara said. "I hope she can swim, because I am pulling the plug." Elara turned to Silas Sterling. "Silas, does Thorn Capital still have that pending loan application with the Sterling Bank?" "They do," Silas said. $200 million for their operational costs next quarter." "Deny it," Elara said. "Done," Silas replied instantly. "No!" Jasper screamed. "You can't do that! That kills the company! We have payroll next week!" "Not my problem," Elara said. She turned to Henri. "Henri, remove these 2 trespassers from my building. They are not on the list." "With pleasure, madam," Henri said, snapping his fingers. 4 massive security guards materialized. They didn't ask Jasper to leave. They grabbed him by the arms. "Get your hands off me!" Jasper roared, thrashing. "I am Jasper Thorne. She is my wife. Elara, stop this. You can't do this to me. I made you." "You didn't make me, Jasper," Elara said, turning her back on him to face the room of applause. "You just didn't recognize who I was." As Jasper and a mortified Irene were dragged toward the exit, kicking and screaming, the orchestra began to play a waltz. The elite of the world applauded. But the story wasn't over. Jasper wasn't a man who accepted defeat. And as he was thrown out onto the wet pavement of the street he thought he owned, a dark, desperate plan began to form in his shattered mind. He wouldn't beg. He would take it back. By force. The rain outside the St. Regis Legacy Hall was torrential, washing away the grime of the city but doing nothing to cleanse the humiliation clinging to Jasper Thorne. He stood on the sidewalk, his tuxedo soaked, watching the taillights of limousines depart. Limousines filled with people who were currently laughing at him. Irene Vane stood under the awning of a nearby closed boutique, shivering. The silver metallic dress that had looked so powerful inside now looked like cheap tinfoil. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in dark, jagged lines. "Get an Uber," Jasper snapped, wiping water from his eyes. "We're going to the office. We need to strategize." Irene laughed. It was a brittle, sharp sound. "We? There is no we, Jasper. You're radioactive. Did you see Silas Sterling's face? You're finished." "I am not finished!" Jasper roared, kicking a puddle, sending muddy water splashing onto his trousers. "She's my wife, Irene! My wife! In the eyes of the law, half of what she has is mine. If she's worth billions, then I'm worth billions. This isn't a defeat. It's a payday." Irene looked at him with a mixture of pity and calculation. The lawyer in her was waking up. "Does she have a prenup?" "No," Jasper sneered. "I didn't bother. I thought she was poor. I didn't want to pay for the lawyer fees to protect my money from a waitress. The irony, right? But it works in my favor now. New York is an equitable distribution state. I'm going to sue her for divorce, and I'm going to take the St. Jason fortune apart brick by brick." He pulled out his phone, his fingers slipping on the wet screen. "I'm calling my legal team. We're filing for an emergency freeze on her assets tomorrow morning. Alleging fraud. She lied about her identity. That's grounds for annulment, or at least a massive settlement for emotional distress." Irene didn't move. She was watching a black sedan pull up. It wasn't an Uber. It was a private car service. "Where are you going?" Jasper asked, grabbing her wrist. "We need to draft the motion." "Let go of me, Jasper," Irene hissed, wrenching her arm free. "You don't get it. You're playing checkers. She's playing 4D chess." She didn't just reveal herself tonight because she was mad about a party. She revealed herself because the trap was finally shut. You're not the hunter anymore. You're the prey. "You're walking away from me?" Jasper looked at her, betrayed. "I put you on the list." "And she took you off the planet," Irene said, opening the car door. "I represent winners, Jasper. Goodbye." She slammed the door, leaving Jasper alone in the rain. Fueled by rage and a desperate need for control, Jasper stormed back to the Thorne Capitol Tower. It was 11 p.m. The building was dark, save for the emergency lights. He bypassed the security desk, ignoring the night guard's surprised look, and went straight to the top floor. He needed leverage. He needed to find the paper trail of those, quote, shell companies she mentioned. If he could prove she had been manipulating his business, he could countersue. He sat at his desk, the wet tuxedo smelling of damp wool, and logged into the mainframe. Access denied. He frowned. He typed his password again. admin_jthorne. Access denied. User account disabled. "What?" Jasper whispered. "I'm the CEO. Who disabled my account?" He tried the backup admin code. Denied. He tried to access the bank accounts. Denied. His office phone rang. The harsh digital trill made him jump. He stared at it. Who would be calling the landline at midnight? He picked it up slowly. Thorne. Mr. Thorne, a calm, synthesized voice spoke. It wasn't a person. It was the automated alert system from the SEC. This is an automated notification regarding a hostile takeover bid initiated at 10:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The majority shareholder has called for an emergency board vote to remove the current CEO due to gross negligence and conflict of interest. The vote is scheduled for 8 a.m. tomorrow. Majority shareholder? Jasper stammered. I own 51% of the voting stock. I am the majority shareholder. Correction, the voice droned. Your shares were held as collateral against the loans provided by Blue Phoenix Ventures. Due to a default on the loan covenants triggered 1 hour ago, Blue Phoenix Ventures has exercised its right to seize the collateral. You currently hold 0%. Jasper dropped the phone. Blue Phoenix Ventures, Elara. She hadn't just funded him, she had loaned him money against his own stock using a shell company. And the moment Silas Sterling denied the new loan, the one Jasper needed to stay liquid, he technically defaulted on his debts. She had designed his company so that she could swallow it whole whenever she wanted. Jasper sank back into his chair. He looked around the office he was so proud of. The awards, the mahogany, the view. None of it was his. It never had been. He was just a tenant in a life she had paid for. But Jasper Thorne had one card left. He knew where the bodies were buried. He knew about the questionable tax write-offs the board had approved. If he was going down, he would burn the whole company down. He would blackmail the board into keeping him. He grabbed his briefcase. He would show up at that 8 a.m. meeting. He wouldn't beg. He would threaten. The morning sun that hit the glass facade of the Thorne Capitol Tower was blinding, a stark, unforgiving white light that seemed determined to expose every crack in Jasper Thorne's crumbling empire. Inside the building, the air was recycled and cold, carrying the sterile scent of floor wax and impending doom. It was 7:55 a.m. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 8 a.m. sharp. Jasper stood in the private bathroom attached to the CEO's office, an office he had occupied for 5 years, an office he had designed to intimidate anyone who walked through the door. He splashed freezing water onto his face, gasping as the shock hit his skin. He looked up at the mirror. The man staring back was a stranger. His eyes, usually sharp and predatory, were rimmed with red, the whites veined with exhaustion. His skin was gray, and despite the $3,000 suit he had freshly donned from his emergency wardrobe, he looked like a man on death row. "Pull it together," he hissed at his reflection, baring his teeth. "You are Jasper Thorne. You built this. You own them." He didn't own them. He knew that now. The terrifying phone call from the night before still echoed in his mind. 0% equity. The words felt like a physical blow. But Jasper was a fighter. He was a street brawler in a bespoke suit. He didn't need equity if he had leverage. And he had leverage in spades. He grabbed his leather folio from the marble counter. Inside was a dossier he had kept for years, his insurance policy. It contained details of the chairman's gambling debts in Macau. It had photos of the CFO's Mistress. It had the true audit reports that showed how the board had approved risky subprime loans to inflate the quarter's stock price. If he was going down, he would detonate a nuclear bomb in the center of the boardroom. He would burn Thorne Capital to the ground before he let her take it. He adjusted his tie, took a deep breath that rattled in his chest, and marched out of the office. The walk to the boardroom felt like a funeral procession. The assistants in the hallway, usually eager to offer coffee or a greeting, kept their heads down. They knew. In the corporate world, the smell of blood in the water was impossible to mask. They were already distancing themselves from the carcass. Jasper pushed open the heavy double doors of the boardroom. The room was silent. 12 men and women, the titans of industry who sat on his board, were already seated around the massive oval glass table. Usually, when Jasper entered, they would look up, nod, or smile. Today, the atmosphere was suffocating. It was heavy. thick with tension and averted gazes. Chairman Vance, a silver-haired man with a reputation for ruthlessness that rivaled Jasper's own, sat at the far end. He didn't stand. He tapped a gold pen rhythmically against the glass surface. Tap, tap, tap. It sounded like a countdown. Jasper walked to the head of the table, the CEO's chair. He placed his hands on the back of the leather seat, leaning forward, projecting a dominance he didn't feel. "Good morning," Jasper said. His voice was too loud, cracking slightly on the first syllable before he smoothed it out. "I assume you've all heard the rumors. The hostile takeover attempt, the glitch in the SEC filing system." "It's not a rumor, Jasper," Vance said, finally stopping the tapping. He looked up, his eyes cold behind rimless spectacles. "And it wasn't a glitch. We received the transfer of ownership documents at 4 a.m. this morning. The majority stake in Thorn Capital has been acquired by Blue Phoenix Ventures." "Blue Phoenix is a shell," Jasper shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The sudden noise made Martha, the head of HR, flinch. "It's a fraudulent entity set up by my vindictive wife to leverage a domestic dispute into corporate sabotage. I am filing an injunction this morning. This meeting is premature." "The meeting is mandatory," Vance replied, his voice calm and bored. "The new majority owner has called for a vote of no confidence. Motion 45B, removal of the CEO for cause." "For cause?" Jasper laughed, a jagged, manic sound. "I doubled this company's revenue in 3 years. I am the cause of your wealth. You want to talk about cause? Let's talk about cause." Jasper ripped open his leather folio. He pulled out a stack of papers and threw them onto the glass table. They slid across the surface, scattering in front of the board members. "Page 4. Vance," Jasper sneered, pointing a shaking finger. "Your wire transfers to the Cayman Islands. Page 7, Martha. The hush money paid to your former assistant. I have files on every single one of you. You vote me out, and I go to the New York Times. I go to the SEC. I go to the FBI. I will take this entire ship down with me." The room went deadly silent. The blackmail was naked, ugly, and undeniable. Jasper watched their faces. He saw fear. He saw hesitation. "I have them," he thought, a surge of adrenaline flooding his veins. "They're scared. They'll keep me just to keep me quiet." "So," Jasper said, buttoning his jacket, feeling the power return, "here is what is going to happen. We are going to reject the motion. We are going to issue a statement supporting my leadership. And then we are going to fight this hostile takeover in court." "That is a compelling argument, Mr. Thorn," a voice came from the intercom speaker on the table. "But blackmail only works if you have credibility. And as of this morning, you have none." The main doors at the far end of the room, the ceremonial doors that were only used for visiting dignitaries, began to open. They didn't swing fast. They opened with a slow, hydraulic hiss. Jasper spun around. The light from the hallway spilled into the dim boardroom, creating a silhouette. Elara stood there. If she had looked like a queen the night before at the gala, today she looked like the executioner. She was not wearing a gown. She was wearing a suit of pure, blinding white, a sharp, structural blazer, with peaked lapels and wide-legged trousers that flowed like water when she moved. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, intricate chignon, revealing the sharp line of her jaw. She wore no jewelry, except for a simple, terrifyingly expensive Patek Philippe watch on her left wrist. She didn't walk. She glided. The silence in the room changed texture. It went from the silence of fear to the silence of awe. But she wasn't alone. Walking a step behind her, carrying a sleek black briefcase, was Irene Vane. Jasper felt his knees buckle. He grabbed the back of his chair to stay upright. His brain couldn't process the image. Irene, his shark, his weapon, the woman he had brought to the gala to humiliate Elara, was walking in step with his wife. "Irene?" Jasper whispered, the word escaping his lips like a dying breath. Irene didn't look at him. She looked straight ahead, her face a mask of professional indifference. She walked past Jasper as if he were a piece of furniture, placed the briefcase on the table near Chairman Vance, and opened it. "Good morning, board members," Irene said. Her voice was crisp, clear, and devoid of the flirtatious warmth she had used on Jasper just 24 hours ago. I am Irene Vane, acting legal counsel for Blue Phoenix Ventures and the St. Jason Trust. I am here to facilitate the transition of power. Transition of power? Jasper stammered, stepping toward her. Irene, what are you doing? I hired you. You work for me. Irene finally turned to look at him. Her eyes were hard. I work for winners, Jasper. And I work for people who can pay their invoices. Your credit cards were declined this morning at 6 a.m. Mrs. Street Jason, however, wired a retainer to my firm that covers my services for the next 5 years. It's nothing personal. It's just business. Isn't that your favorite saying? Jasper recoiled as if she had slapped him. He looked at Elara. Elara had reached the head of the table. She stood next to Jasper, close enough that he could smell that intoxicating scent of jasmine and oud, but she felt miles away. She looked at the chair, his chair, and then looked at him. You're in my seat, Elara said softly. Elara, stop this, Jasper pleaded, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Please, look at me. It's me, Jasper. I'm your husband. We can talk about this. We can fix this at home. Home? Elara raised an eyebrow. You mean the penthouse that is owned by the St. Jason Trust? The one you haven't paid rent on in 5 years because I told the management company to waive it? You don't have a home, Jasper. You have a hospitality suite that I have decided to close. She turned to the board, ignoring him completely. Gentlemen, ladies. Elara addressed the room. Her voice was melodic, but commanded absolute authority. I apologize for the theatrics regarding Mr. Thorne's little dossier of secrets. She gestured to the blackmail papers scattered on the table. You can ignore those, Elara said, because if Mr. Thorne releases any of that information, he will be violating the non-disclosure agreement he signed when he took the seed money for this company 5 years ago. An NDA that stipulates any disparagement of the board or the company results in the immediate forfeiture of his pension and exposes him to personal liability for all company debts. Jasper's eyes widened. I never signed an NDA like that. You did, Irene interjected, pulling a document from her briefcase. It was buried in the Clause 84C of your initial incorporation papers. You didn't read it, did you, Jasper? You were too busy picking out the leather for your office chair. You just signed where Elara pointed. Jasper felt the room spinning. She had trapped him 5 years ago. She had been playing a game he didn't even know existed. Furthermore, Elara continued, we are not just removing Mr. Thorne for incompetence. We are removing him for felony embezzlement. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Embezzlement. That's a lie. Jasper shrieked, panic finally taking over completely. I never stole a dime. Every expense was approved. Irene, Elara said calmly, the file. Irene slid a thick blue folder across the glass. It stopped directly in front of Jasper. Open it, Elara commanded. Jasper opened it with trembling fingers. On top was a photograph of a yacht, a sleek 120-foot vessel docked in Monaco. The Vanguard, Elara said. Beautiful ship. You purchased it 6 months ago. You told the board it was a corporate retreat venue for high-level clients. But according to the logs, only one person has ever stayed on it. You and various guests of the modeling profession. It was a business asset, Jasper cried. You purchased it using the operational fund, Irene stated, her voice legal and dry. And you registered the title in your personal name, not the company's. That is the textbook definition of embezzlement. We're talking about $12 million, Jasper. That's a Class B felony. Minimum sentence is 10 years in federal prison. 10 years. Jasper looked at the board members. They weren't looking at him with fear anymore. They were looking at him with disgust. He was toxic. He was a criminal. He was done. The fight drained out of him. His shoulders slumped. The manic energy that had fueled him since the gala evaporated, leaving behind only a hollow, terrified shell. What do you want? Jasper whispered. Tears were streaming down his face now, hot and humiliating. Do you want to see me in handcuffs? Is that it? Is this your revenge? Elara looked at him. For a brief second, the mask slipped. Jasper saw a flash of the woman who used to make him pot roast, the woman who used to rub his shoulders after a long day. He saw sadness. Deep, profound sadness. "I don't want revenge, Jasper," Elara said quietly. "Revenge is for people who care. I just want a correction." She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a single sheet of paper and a simple plastic pen. She placed them on the table. "This is a settlement agreement," Elara said. "It states that you resign immediately. You waive all rights to your stock options. You waive any claim to alimony or marital assets. You walk away with nothing but the clothes on your back." "And if I sign?" Jasper asked, his voice shaking. "If you sign, Blue Phoenix Ventures agrees not to press criminal charges regarding the yacht. We will classify it as an accounting error and absorb the loss. You stay out of prison." It wasn't a choice. It was an execution. Jasper looked at the pen. It was a cheap Bic pen, the kind you'd find at a diner. He looked at Elara. She was merciless, magnificent, and utterly out of his league. "I loved you," Jasper choked out. It was a lie, and they both knew it. He loved how she made him feel. He loved that she was small so he could feel big. "No, Jasper," Elara said, her voice devoid of pity. "You loved the reflection of yourself you saw in my eyes. Sign the paper." With a trembling hand, Jasper picked up the cheap pen. He scribbled his signature at the bottom of the page. It was a messy scrawl, the signature of a broken man. "Done," he whispered. "Good," Elara said. She picked up the paper and handed it to Irene. Then she reached into her other pocket. She pulled out a set of keys. They were old, silver keys on a faded plastic keychain shaped like a cheeseburger. She placed them on the glass table. "What is this?" Jasper asked, staring at the cheeseburger. "Severance," Elara said. The board members watched in confused silence. "That is the key to Benny's Diner in New Jersey," Elara explained. "I bought it this morning from the previous owner, who was about to declare bankruptcy." "The diner?" Jasper looked up, bewildered. "The place where we met." "The place where you thought you saved me," Elara corrected. "It's a mess, Jasper. The roof leaks. The fryer is broken. The staff is underpaid and demoralized. It's failing because the owner was arrogant and stopped caring about the quality of the service." She stepped closer to him, her voice lowering so only he could hear the full weight of her words. "You need a job, and you need a lesson. You're going to go there, and you're going to run it. You're going to scrub the grease traps. You're going to serve coffee to people who can't afford to tip. You're going to learn what it actually means to work for a living, without a safety net, without a trust fund, without a wife to clean up your mess." "You want me to be a fry cook?" Jasper asked, horrified. "I want you to be a man," Elara said. "The deed is in your name. It's the only asset you have left in the world. Sink or swim, Jasper. It's entirely up to you." Jasper stared at the keys. It was a humiliation beyond words, but it was also a lifeline. She wasn't destroying him completely. She was giving him the one thing he had denied her, a chance to prove his worth based on merit, not money. Slowly, his hand reached out. He closed his fingers around the cold metal of the keys. "Get out," Elara said. It wasn't shouted. It was a simple dismissal. Jasper turned. He didn't look at the board. He didn't look at Irene. He walked toward the door, his footsteps heavy and uneven. He felt the eyes of everyone on his back, burning him. He reached the door, pushed it open, and stepped out into the hallway. The bright, sterile light of the office felt different now. It didn't feel like his kingdom. It felt like a place he had never truly belonged. He walked to the elevator. He pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, blotting out the sight of the Thorn Capital logo, Jasper Thorn, former billionaire, former husband, current diner owner, leaned his head against the cold metal wall and wept. Back in the boardroom, the silence lingered for a long moment after the elevator chimed. Chairman Vance cleared his throat. He looked at Elara with a newfound respect, bordering on fear. "That was decisive, Mrs. Street Jason," Vance said carefully. "How should we proceed? The markets are opening in 10 minutes. The stock will plummet when the news of Jasper's resignation hits." Elara walked to the head of the table. She didn't sit in Jasper's chair. She pushed it aside and stood at the head, commanding the room from her feet. "Let it plummet," Elara said, her eyes scanning the skyline of Manhattan, visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "We'll buy back the outstanding shares at a discount. By noon, we will have consolidated total control." She turned to face the 12 anxious billionaires. "And effective immediately, we are rebranding. The name Thorn is to be scrubbed from the building, the letterheads, and the servers within 24 hours. What shall we call the company?" Martha asked, her pen poised over her notepad. Elara touched the spot on her neck where the star of the East Sapphire had rested the night before, the symbol of her family, her history, and the fire she had hidden for so long. "Call it Phoenix Capital," Elara said, a small, triumphant smile touching her lips for the first time that day. "Because today, we rise from the ashes." "And the gala next year?" Irene asked, closing her briefcase, the execution complete. "Who makes the guest list?" Elara looked out at the city, at the millions of people striving, fighting, and dreaming. She thought of the diner in New Jersey. She thought of the waitress who had served a billionaire a cup of coffee 5 years ago, hoping for love and finding only a lesson. "Everyone," Elara said. "Next year, no red ink. No VIP exclusions. I want to see who people really are, not just what they wear." She turned and walked toward the door, her white suit glowing in the morning sun. The waitress was gone. The victim was gone. The owner had arrived, and the world was finally ready to meet her. And, just like that, Jasper Thorn learned the most expensive lesson of his life. You never know who you're truly sleeping next to. He thought he was erasing a stain on his reputation, but he ended up erasing his own future. Elara proved that true power isn't about shouting the loudest or wearing the most expensive suit. It's about knowing exactly what you're worth and never settling for less. Jasper is now back where he started, wiping tables, while Elara rules the empire he built on her back. So here is my question for you. If you were Elara, would you have given Jasper the diner and kept him out of jail? Or would you have sent him straight to prison for what he did? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this story of betrayal and ultimate revenge, please smash that like button, share this video with a friend who loves drama, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching.